When things started erupting on university campuses, and I think one of the incidents that a lot of people might recall is when Nicholas Christakis tried to appease his students, and you may just want to tell a younger Australian audience what happened there. It sort of was an inciting incident, I suppose, in the university culture wars that have ended up with you in the position that you're in, which we'll get to in a moment. One of the things that one of the students yelled at him was, "It's not your job to tell us what to know. It's your job to make us feel
Correct.
safe." And what you're talking about there about like black people pull over more than white people, you could have questions about, what proportion of the male population is committing domestic violence when you hear about allegations that all men are predators. You can have, there are all these, and it's extremely sensitive to even broach these subjects because it sounds like you're being a defender of rapists or racists or worse. But when you're digging down into the data of this stuff, there is a parallel conversation going on at the moment with a lot of people, which is like, who gives a shit about data? This is my life we're talking about. If I'm the girl who's shouting at Nicholas Christakis on university campus, I want to feel as though I am safe. And I want you as a partner in helping me to feel safe, regardless of what the data says.
Thank you for saying that. That's part of the defense mechanism of the ideology. The ideology has multiple defense mechanisms, not only to keep it in place, but to keep other people from questioning the ideology at all. So racist is a tool that they have in the toolkit. If you contradict something, or harassment is another one. For my former university, Portland State University, published or the faculty resolution said that criticism of, and I'll be happy to send you these videos, at a faculty senate resolution that criticism of critical race theory is a type of harassment. And again, this is a public, because of the coronavirus, these were all recorded and placed on YouTube. And then they took it down, and they wanted the National Association of Scholars to take down their commentary on it. One of my colleagues published a critique on myself and another faculty member that basically saying criticism of ideas is harassment. So when you criticize these ideas, you're harassing. I'm getting to your point. I published a piece in the Chronicle, criticism of ideas is not harassment. In fact, not only is it not harassment, it's the coin of the realm. This is what we do. We publish, we engage, we debate. So the ideology has certain things to keep it in place. Another thing is platforming, saying, oh, you're providing a platform, you're talking to someone has an odious view. And not only that, there's platforming by proxy. So it's not that you don't want to have a conversation with someone, they don't even want someone to have a conversation with you. So you're guilty by association. So that all of those things keep the ideology from experiencing any external criticism. They keep it in place. Safetyism now, so that's the contextual background for your question. So safetyism is another thing. And we see this all the time now. People say, I feel unsafe. Okay, so if you feel unsafe, you should probably take a creative writing class, right? An ethics class in philosophy is not the place for you, right? Maybe you should, sing on a street corner with a guitar or something, but you really, to really make a substantive engagement of moral questions and moral issues, you have to take a sincere look at the other side. I mean, you just have to, because if you don't, you're validating the conclusions that you came in with in the first place. And the purpose of an educational institution, the purpose of an education period, should not be to deepen people in the beliefs they have they come into the classroom. I mean, Plato's book 7 of the Republic, it's to lead people out of, right? Educare, to lead out of, it's not to put stuff in, it's to lead one out of a state of ignorance. And to do that, you have to have some kind of challenging of the beliefs that you have. If not, you're just kept in the cave.
Where does safety is another, I mean, we're doing the greatest hits of words that have become abused in recent times. You mentioned equity, and we went to diversity. Diversity is also interesting because in the States, I mean, this was a usage of the term diversity that I hadn't quite encountered. But when I lived in the States for a while, and one of the first periods that I was there, I read a review about this great new diverse show, which was Super Diverse. And it was, I think it was Blackish, where every single cast member is an African-American. Correct. And I turned it on and I didn't even understand. I thought there must have been a mistake, because diverse would mean people from lots of different cultures.
Correct.
And that shouldn't turn in. There was just, it was the least diverse show on television in terms of the
Correct.
strict meaning of the word. But that's just another way that words change. And safety is another one now that we've come
Yeah,
here.
and
You know,
and
safe.
let's can I so can I also put another one that dovetails with safetyism that will help us understand safetyism is inclusion. So I have a series of videos that I'm putting out now, will be out next month. I have a nonprofit that I just started since I left my job, National Progress Alliance. And one of the first things that I'm trying to do is to clarify the meanings of words. And I do this in 60 seconds in very basic language. So let me prep to see how good this is.
Okay.
So inclusion basically means, it doesn't mean what you think it means. So maybe you know because you're in the space, but ask someone in the crew over there what they think inclusion means, and they'll probably almost definitely tell you, well, including different people. That's not what inclusion means. I'll tell you what inclusion means. Inclusion from the literature means making people feel safe, making people feel welcome. If people are not welcome, they do not feel safe. How do we make people feel safe? Well, how do we make them feel unsafe? How do we make them feel unwelcome? Well, if somebody says something that is offensive to somebody or bothers someone or disturbs someone, then they won't feel welcome. But we want people to feel welcome. So inclusion means restricted speech. That's what inclusion means. Every time you hear the word inclusion, you should translate that in your head as restricted speech, because that's the only way people can feel welcome is if you restrict their speech.
And
that's a form of safety.
Isn't the counterpoint to that? Well, we're restricting speech, but we're restricting hate speech. We're creating an inclusive space, and if you want to come in here peddling homophobia, transphobia, racism, and so on, then we'll exclude that. But that's in the service of a more inclusive environment.
Yeah, I'll be very blunt with you. That's the kind of thinking that people who they're using a blunt instrument and they haven't truly thought about it. And it's a pretty easy line to make. If something is an immutable property of a person, then don't criticize it. But all ideas should be criticized. For example, I have gray hair. That's an immutable property. I'm 55 years old. That's an immutable property. Because I can't change it, there's no point in criticizing it. I'm heterosexual. I can't change that. I never at 15, I've decided I've made this thought. But even if I could make that thoughtful decision, there's a difference between an immutable property of a person and an idea. And we need to be absolutely ruthless with ideas. And there's no criticism of immutable properties of people because they can't change them.
Right, but some ideas make people who possess certain immutable properties uncomfortable because it would leave them with the short end of the stick, so to speak. Like if you were in an environment in which people were saying that someone of your age and your hair color should not receive the same tax benefits as everybody else, then you would feel like that was not an inclusive place for you.
I'll tell you a quick story. A few years ago, I tried an experiment. This was before the pandemic. I had white hair back then as well. They don't call it gray hair anymore. They call it silver hair.
I like that because I can just see it coming on the side. So I'm going to do it pretty soon.
Yeah, they call it silver hair. So I tried an experiment just for fun. I think it's the first time I ever told anybody this, but I like to stretch because I think stretching is important. And I go to a local gym here. It's like it's like the McDonald's of gyms, and they have basketball courts everywhere. And I would always sit on the basketball court just as an experiment, stretching to see if I would get picked. And then I would tell people I don't want to play because I was just more interested in stretching, but it was an experiment. It was for science. So what I would do is I would see when I would get picked, and invariably I'd either get picked dead last or I wouldn't get picked at all. Now, the question is, if your goal is to win, is it unfair? Is it unjust to not pick me because of my immutable characteristics? Well, the answer, that's exactly the kind of thing that you need to have a conversation about. And if you cannot have a conversation about whether or not look, the solution to all of this is have a conversation, is have a dialogue, is to kind of make a moral infrastructure from which you can formulate your public policies. But that moral infrastructure, like when you started the conversation about equity, that moral infrastructure has to be rooted in rationally derivable principles, or it's just arbitrary. You're basically just making shit up, right? So we need to have a way to think, okay, well, that's a person. What if I say, what if some evidence comes out that there are racial differences in IQ? Does that mean that we don't let people from a certain country in, or for certain, or from your continent? See, I've elevated you to a continent. We found
Thank you so much. I appreciate the upgrade.
We found that people from Australia or what have you, usually be racial groups, but I was just saying that because it makes it more palatable. So does that mean we don't have that conversation? Does that mean that that's just off the table? So here's the consequence of not having that conversation when confronted with data. There will be people who are more than willing not only to have that conversation, but to come in with answers to those problems. So there will be people almost always on the extreme political spectrum who have answers or will claim to have answers to those questions. And if you've not prepared yourself for how to have those conversations, that's my book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, then you simply won't know what to say. And that's the situation in which we find ourselves now, although with less morally contentious and difficult topics. With even the lowest of low-hanging fruit, we're producing generations of students, I think a generation and a half at this point, who are utterly incapable of even knowing what the other side is to have a substantive rebuttal of those criticisms. And that's a problem for all of us because they're bringing that into the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you've really hit on the crux of things there, because even if people don't care about being intellectually rigorous, and even if they only want their own side to win, and they want safetyism and comfort and inclusion to take dominance over difficult conversations, at the end of the day, their side isn't going to win if they don't know how to articulate their position against the things that they disagree with. This reminds me a little bit of the sense of safety or unsafety around the gay marriage debate that took place in Australia in 2017. Unlike the United States, where it was a judicial decision, here it was a referendum, and everybody voted. And there were a lot of people saying this makes me feel unsafe as a member of the LGBTQI+ community. This is there should not even be a conversation. This should not be a conversation because this is a human right.